What if asking the wrong question could destroy your life? What if morality wasn't about right or wrong, but about power? Choosing who gets to speak and who gets erased. One man wrote a play that asked too much. Another uncovered a famine that wasn't supposed to exist. Both believed the truth mattered. Both were buried beneath lies. And behind it all, a mask. Smiling, silent, watching. London, 1895. The Empire shines, lit by gaslight, dressed in gold. Behind velvet curtains and soft laughter, the crown presents its goodness like a prized jewel, polished, heavy, designed to impress. Inside the Orpheum Theatre, the wealthy laugh as Claro's White's play unfolds. Aristocrats, amused and slightly drunk, watch actors mock their world, wigs askew, fake outrage worn like cologne. Claro stands in the wings. He does not smile. In his hand, a letter, creased and stained. The wax seal long broken, the words inside still burning. He should be proud. The papers call him the Empire's sharpest wit. The rich call him a rebel, but one they can clap for, safely, from red velvet seats. Tonight, their laughter makes him sick. On stage, a mask catches the light, lacquered, laughing. It slips from an actor's hand and lands face up on the floor. The audience roars. They think it's part of the joke. Claros turns away. Outside, smoke rises from lamplighters' poles. Newsboys shout.
Trouble in India! Governor says grain reserves are fine!
Claros walks past them. He doesn't speak. The letter stays tight in his hand. Elias had written of hunger, of grain carts that arrived empty, of officials who took everything and left children to starve. Claros had scoffed.
The Empire is just, Elias. You exaggerate.
But even then, the words rang false. A beggar's cough echoes in the fog. The curtain falls somewhere behind him. He was the Empire's darling, a rebel in name only, sharp enough to entertain the powerful, but never sharp enough to draw blood. Claros White dined under chandeliers. He danced with duchesses. He posed for painters who called him modern, daring, brilliant. Every night, his name glittered in gaslight. They loved him because he made them laugh at themselves, but never too much. The papers praised his wit. They called him a dangerous pen with dull teeth. It was meant as a compliment. He smiled through interviews, deflected questions, laughed at the idea of taking sides. He didn't write for justice. He wrote for applause. At least, that's what he told himself. But the letters kept coming. From a friend long swallowed by the colonies. From a boy who once sat beside him beneath a summer tree, trading stories of glory and greatness, before either of them had seen what the Empire truly looked like. At first, Claros read them out of duty, then out of guilt, then out of something else, something harder to name. Elias wrote of Bengal, of rail lines built not to feed the starving, but to move grain away from them, of warehouses full while villages emptied.
I thought I came to serve,
Elias wrote.
but I have become a witness to theft.
Claros had laughed the first time he read it.
The Empire doesn't starve people, Elias. You're tired. Overworked. Too close to it.
He poured another glass of port, told himself Elias was exaggerating, that colonial life had made him dramatic, but the words stayed with him, like the smell of smoke days after the fire. He started noticing things he hadn't before, how quickly the headlines turned when a famine was mentioned, how dinner guests changed the subject, how ministers used words like unrest, instability, moral decay, whenever Elias's letters whispered a simple truth. They are hungry. One night, Claros threw the letters into the fire, watched the pages curl, watched ink melt into ash. But the next morning, he was on his knees in the cold grate, pulling out what hadn't burned. The letters kept arriving, each one darker, less polished, written not for wit or memory, but necessity. Elias no longer wrote like a friend. He wrote like a man trying to hold back a tide.
Grain moves by the ton, past starving towns, to ports. The warehouses are full, the fields are empty. We say it's drought, but the railways are full of guards. Why guard famine? They say I asked too many questions. Someone asked who I report to. I said the truth. He didn't smile.
The handwriting had changed. Fast, angled, smeared in places. It looked like a man trying to outrun something with ink. Claros folded the letters carefully, placed them in drawers, then moved them to a box, then took them out again. He told himself it wasn't his fight, that Elias was exaggerating, too far from home, too deep in it.
Maybe it's local corruption.
Claros said aloud once.
Mismanagement, not murder.
He said it to no one, not even himself, because part of him already knew, not the whole truth, but enough. Enough to feel it in the pit of his stomach when the newspapers ran stories about unrest, but never famine. About agitation, but never starvation. The silence said more than the words. He stopped going to the theater early. He stopped laughing at parties. He told people he was working on something new. They nodded and told him brilliant, but the applause no longer reached him. He read the letters again and again, and when the last one came, he unfolded it with a kind of dread.
I still think it can be changed. The problem is not the idea of empire, it's who profits. If we name them, maybe it ends. I'll keep digging. I'm close now. I know it's dangerous, but someone must speak.
There was no warning, no plea, no goodbye. Just a letter, written in hope, unstained by fear. The last letter arrived without flourish. No warning, no crescendo. Just another envelope among many, except for the tightness in Elias's handwriting.
I've begun to ask questions aloud. There are fewer hands to shake, more doors closed. A man from the revenue office asked what I was really doing here. Still, I believe we can fix it. The problem is men, not nations. The rot is in the greed, not in the soil.
No signature, just a smudge of ink at the bottom, as if the pen had been yanked away. That was the last Claros heard from Elias. Then came the second letter, not from Elias, from a man Claros had almost forgotten, a mutual acquaintance from university. Polite, distant, careful with his words, the kind of man who rarely wrote unless he had to.
I'm sorry to tell you this.
It began.
Elias is dead. He fell from a balcony at the station house. They say he had been drinking, that he was unstable, though I never once saw him drink. That's all I know.
There were no flourishes, no suspicions, just flat facts copied from someone else's mouth. And yet, Claros knew, not because of what was said, but because of what was impossible. Elias was afraid of heights, always had been. As a child, he wouldn't climb trees. He wouldn't even lean out the library's second-story window. And he didn't drink. Not at school. Not in India. He'd once refused port at Claros's own table. So the story didn't make sense. Like most lies don't. Too neat, too convenient. He fell. He drank. He's gone. The silence behind it was deafening. Claros didn't cry, didn't speak. He simply sat, the letter on the desk, the world unchanged, except inside him, where something cracked. Not like a glass, but like a dam. And what spilled through wasn't grief, it was anger. Claros didn't speak, not to the papers, not to friends, not even to himself. He didn't know what to say. But the news said plenty. Colonial official dies in full, rumors of distress. Disgraced civil servant fabricated famine claims. Drink, delusions, and decline. The headlines came fast, a new one each day. Brief, blunt, suspiciously aligned. They called Elias a liar, an agitator, a failure, the man who had once believed in empire, now buried as a threat to it. And Claros knew. He knew it wasn't just about Elias. It was a message. Speak, and we will unmake you. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. He still believed in the strength of his name, in the weight of his fame. He believed that his voice, the Empire's favorite pen, could not be erased so easily. So he did what he knew how to do. He wrote a new play, not a comedy, not a satire in velvet gloves. This one cut deeper. He called it The Crowned Shadow. A fable on the surface, a question at its heart. It told of a kingdom, Albion, whose virtue masked a hunger it refused to see, whose kings claimed glory while their people starved. He wrote of a prophet, a quiet man who asked only why, who uncovered theft, who fell from a balcony and was called a traitor. And in the end, he wrote the question that burned in his chest. If the Empire's morality is a lie, what right has it to rule? He didn't name Elias. He didn't have to. He lit a candle, stacked the pages, and whispered.
They killed you with silence. I'll answer with noise.
He believed the play would protect him. He believed it would wake them. He still thought the truth, spoken on a stage, could survive anything. The Crowned Shadow opened on a cold night in February. The theatre was full. Every seat taken, every ticket sold. Some came for art, some came for gossip, some came to see just how far Clarus Wide would go. He went further than any expected. It was no satire, no elegant parody. It was a blade, wrapped in poetry. Albion feeds the world, said one character, but her own people shrink. Albion rules by virtue, said another, but her virtue is stitched from stolen grain. Gasps in the audience, shifting in seats, silence like a held breath. And in the final act, the prophet stood center stage, surrounded by masked kings and veiled ministers, and asked,
If the Empire's morality is a lie, what right has it to rule?
Then he removed his own mask and dropped it to the floor. It didn't bounce. It cracked. Some in the crowd applauded. Others rose and left. One man wept. And in the back row, beneath a velvet curtain, a government minister watched without blinking. Clarus walked off stage to roaring silence. He expected praise. He expected outrage. He expected to start something. He believed the people would think. He believed the powerful would flinch. And most of all, he believed his name would shield him. But not everyone applauded. And applause, he would learn, is not the same as protection. They didn't knock on his door. They didn't drag him away in the night. They didn't need to. They let the newspapers do it first. A letter, private, never meant for eyes beyond Elias's, now clipped, distorted, and stamped across headlines.
Your truth haunts me. I must speak it.
They printed it as confession, proof of intent, evidence of rebellion. Claros Wide behind the crown's rot. Morality under attack. Parliament responds to theatrical outrage. Wide to stand trial for corrupting youth. The articles weren't just reporting. They were building a case. And the case was never really about law. It was about performance. Claros watched as his name cracked open in public. He walked past his own face on cartoon placards, mouth twisted, scrolls for fangs, a mask hanging from his neck like a noose. He thought they might laugh it off, that the storm would pass. Instead, it fed on itself. Protests formed outside theaters, boycotts, moral condemnation by bishops and bank owners alike. People burned copies of The Crowned Shadow in the street, many who had never read a word of it. They only needed the mask, the headlines, the feeling of righteousness. Then, and only then, did the government act. The ministers, seated behind glass and curtains, had waited long enough. The industrialist leaned over his brandy and said what they all knew. The crowd is ready. Now, let's bury him. The charges came quickly. Incitement, civic corruption, instigating sedition through art. Claros barely read them. He understood the real charge. Daring to question the truths carved in stone. They led him into court past rows of cameras and whispering pens. The same crowd that once filled his theater now filled benches, waiting for a different kind of performance. He stood beneath chandeliers he'd toasted under, facing a judge whose name once appeared on his guest list. The stolen letter was read aloud.
Your truth haunts me.
The prosecutor smiled.
And so he wrote a play. Not art, ladies and gentlemen, but infection, treason, hidden in costume.
Claros tried to speak. He said Elias's name. They struck it from the record. He spoke of famine. They called it irrelevant. He mentioned grain. They moved on.
So you see yourself as a prophet?
The judge asked. Claros stared at him, not defiant, not pleading, just tired. They gave him 2 years. Hard labor, officially for incitement. But Claros knew. The real sentence was being unwritten. His name scrubbed clean. His story replaced. The next day, the headline read, "Justice served. Crown defends moral order." Below it, in smaller type, "Famine worsens in Bengal." No photographs, no outrage, just silence. And then, even that disappeared. They took his name first, then the stage, then the light. The cell was small, cold, and quiet. The kind of quiet that hums behind your ears. Hard labor, they called it. But the real work was forgetting. He was meant to vanish, to crumble inside silence, to rot unseen. But Claros wrote. He scratched words onto the walls, into candle stubs, on the backs of ration slips. Not plays, not scripts, just thoughts that refused to die. He remembered the tree, the one they sat beneath as boys. The empire had seemed noble then, all gold trim and shining maps. He remembered Elias's laugh, soft and unafraid. He remembered his fall, not the real one. He never saw that, but the one he imagined every night. A balcony, high and silent, teal shadows pooling below like spilled ink. A mask dropped in the hallway. Elias reaching for the truth, then gone. They took Elias's name. They tried to take his too. But a question remained. Claros carved it once into the wall before the guards scraped it clean.
Keep asking, why?
He scratched it again. Lower, smaller, where they wouldn't see, because the question didn't belong to him or Elias. It belonged to whoever came next. The empire moved on. The famine was forgotten. Elias erased. Claros buried. The mask still smiles. Years pass. Decades blur. Stories fade. But the question remains. A protester. Not Claros, not Elias, just one more voice in a world trained to punish questions. They are gagged by headlines, shamed by crowds, dismissed by those who no longer remember how silence works. And yet, the ember survives. A page drifts, edges scorched, one phrase still glowing in ink. Keep asking, why? Stay curious, ask more, believe less. Because the past doesn't just echo, it repeats.